hearing will come to order. Let me, in part, apologize to the witnesses for the fact that only a couple of us are here. When I originally scheduled this hearing, we were under the impression that there would be votes this morning. On the other hand, your testimony will not be interrupted by our having to go off for an hour while you all sit here. So there are pluses and minuses to that. And staff members of various members are here, and they are often a very good way to get information to us. This hearing is on the subject of the regulation of internet gambling. Gambling in general is not the jurisdiction of this committee. And in fact, I had a conversation on Monday, I believe, of this week, or Tuesday rather, with John Conyers, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. They have primary jurisdiction over gambling. But in the previous Congress, we did enact legislation to restrict the payment for internet debts where credit cards were involved, and that's wholly within our jurisdiction. I vote against that bill, and I think it's important to be clear about what I think is really at issue here. The bill was justified in part by people who said that we must prevent money laundering for the purposes of either terrorism or drugs, and that we must prevent young people from doing things that they shouldn't do. But my own conviction, having talked to a lot of members and listening to the debate, is that the primary motivation came from people who think gambling is wrong. Now, I have no quarrel with people who think that gambling is wrong. My quarrel is with people who, thinking that gambling is wrong, want to prevent other people from doing it. This whole debate has driven me back to a book that I only vaguely remembered, and I have now become impassioned with. John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. I recommend it to people. One of the great philosophic texts in our tradition. He makes the essential point that it is not the role of the government to send people with guns under the threat of imprisonment to make you better. We can give people information. We can, through various institutions in the society, give people instruction. But in the end, adults ought to be able to decide for themselves how they will spend the money that they earn themselves, as long as it does not have an effect on others. Now, it is possible to argue that everything we do affects everybody. People have said, well, you say it doesn't affect others, but if you gamble too much, then you're affecting others. Well, if you do anything too much, it affects others. The problem with that is it's a classic case of an argument that proves too much. If you take that argument, that in fact people have a right to your services, that people have a right for you to be healthy, it goes to extremes. People start telling each other what to eat, when to exercise. All those things affect you. Clearly, there is in the minds of most of us a distinction between those things we do that primarily affect ourselves and those who choose voluntarily to associate with us, and those things that we do that inevitably impact on others. That is a line that I think government would be well advised to respect. And this bill undoes that. And it is one of the rare cases where some of my conservative friends and some of my liberal friends come together. I have conservative friends who tell me gambling is wrong, and apparently I hear from some that there are biblical injunctions against it, although apparently there is an exception for bingo, which I have not yet been able to, I'm not a good enough textual exegete to find it, but I gather it is there. On the part of my liberal friends, to be honest, I think many of them think it's tacky. I think they just don't think it's a nice thing to do, and therefore feel free to ban other people from doing it. Some argue, well, we must protect the poor from spending their money unwisely. I reject that. If you want to help poor people, there are other ways to do it. I suppose if you don't have enough money, there are a lot of things that I might advise you not to do. Drink beer, go to baseball games, buy certain things, spend too much on articles of clothing. Yeah, there are a lot of pieces of advice we should give people. but I would not legally ban lower-income people from spending too much on their athletic shoes or their jeans, and I don't think we should do that here. Now, I know the argument is, well, but there are abuses here. I believe we can deal with the abuses. Let me deal with one, and that is young people. There is a great danger in this society that we will substantially circumscribe the freedom that adults ought to have because we are afraid that some young people might abuse it. It is incumbent upon us to try to differentiate in our laws between what adults can do and young people can do. And as far as the Internet is concerned, and I will say, from a lot of my conservative colleagues, I hear the mantra, never regulate the Internet. And I guess what they really mean is never regulate the Internet unless we find something offensive, and then we'll regulate it. Because this is the most substantive interference with the freedom of the Internet that has ever been enacted into law. People are entitled to be for this. They are not entitled to be for this and then say, oh, but we respect the integrity of the Internet to be free. And let me just close by saying this. We do allow a number of things to go on through the Internet that should be age restricted. You can buy wine over the Internet. You can buy cigarettes over the Internet. You can look at, in fact, the courts have said to us, to the Congress, you have gone too far in terms of First Amendment rights in banning certain kinds of sex-oriented material. Instead, they have said differentiate according to age. So we have been told by the courts, by the Supreme Court of the United States, that it is not appropriate simply to something entirely because young people might abuse it. Instead, we are under the obligation constitutionally to do the best we can to differentiate. I think we know that there are ways that you can not totally prevent, but substantially diminish age-inappropriate uses through the Internet. That ought to be done here. But I again want to repeat, and we're also told, well, gambling is this possible front for terrorism. Well, everything's a possible everything, but there is zero evidence that we have, in fact, had people playing poker so they can bomb buildings. I await that evidence. I hope it isn't there. If it is, I'll look at it, but I don't believe it is. I think, just to close, what we have is people who don't like gambling and think that they have a right through the government to prevent other people from doing it. I regard that as a very grave crossing of the line that we in government ought to respect. I recognize now the gentleman from Alabama.